So we are now joined by Virgil, Texas, and Matt Christman of Chapo Trap House. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So there's so many things I want to ask you, but can you please explain that name?
Well, it began because the show started as an informal discussion that me, my friend Will Menaker, and Felix Biederman, all of whom met online, had via Google Hangouts, just ripping YouTube links off of for audio, not even knowing how to edit them. Mm-hmm. And so the first episode we did was really just a trial. And at the end of it, he jokingly said we should call it that, because of making it sound like a rap mixtape, using hip-hop lingo and whatever. And we all thought that was funny. And then it got really popular almost immediately, and we were essentially stuck with it. But we're all kind of glad, as much as it is kind of nonsensical and silly, we're really glad we didn't think too hard about it, because then it would be something like the Politics Boys with a Z or something right. Very even more embarrassing.
Do you understand his explanation?
Not really. Okay, look, Chapo, is that a reference to El Chapo?
Yeah.
Okay. And how does that fit in with your
What's
overall...
a trap house?
Trap house is where you get drugs. So I'm told. Obviously, it's sort of the ironic.
So is this a drug thing?
The idea. Yeah, it's like the
Are you promoting the drug culture? Is that the point of Chapo Trap
We're
House?
fine with drugs in all their forms, but
right.
just
okay.
The contrast
Isikoff
between
wanted to start with a point of consensus, right?
the contrast between a bunch of
now
dorks talking about
this
politics.
Feels very Frost Nixon right now. Just about this is the hardest anyone's got out of our name.
But no, it's like
we're just
an ironic
started.
counterpoint between a name that sounds like a hip hop mixtape or something, and then a bunch of squeaky voice nerds talking about politics.
Okay, so look, we're talking here in the second week of January, in the aftermath of the news that President Trump has taken out Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guard Quds Force. Are you guys celebrating the death of this enemy of America?
I'm not.
Virgil?
I'm not either. I've been disassociating since the news, and I'm just now kind of putting myself back together.
No, it seems like a disaster and horrible in every way. Very bad. Folks, we don't like to see it.
Yeah, because I want to tease out your thinking here a little bit.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't be there, I think, is our easy sort of slug answer. Is that the United States presence in the Middle East is this attempt to be, the arbiter of whatever, is actually only at every point makes things worse, makes things more fraught. And then we, to explain the chaos we create, decide to blame people actually in the region, like Iran, for destabilization that is all of it comes directly from U.S. intervention. And so the idea that we're going to make anything safer by deepening military actions in the Middle East and doing something as radically destabilizing as attack the top military officer and diplomat for one of the biggest countries in the region is horrifying.
Do you think that that the United States is the main destabilizing presence in the Middle East? I mean, obviously the Iraq War, a lot of people think had that effect. And how would you assess Iran as a destabilizing force?
I mean, they're responding. That's the thing that I can't get over, is the idea every opportunity that Iran has taken to infiltrate themselves into countries from Iraq to Syria. None of these are all vacuums created by American military action and then occupation and the chaos unleashed by that. And they actually live there. And it seems insane to me to be condemning a country for trying to stabilize their neighbors on their own terms, because who wouldn't do that when we are insisting on dictating the terms in the Middle East from 5,000 miles away.
So just one follow-up question on that. So do you think that Iran has the right to pursue a nuclear weapon?
I think, honestly, they have a moral responsibility to pursue and acquire a nuclear weapon, because at this point, it should be pretty clear that the only guarantee against U.S. military aggression is if you have a nuke. So they should get one as soon as they can.
Well, I don't think that's a position that your candidate for president, Bernie Sanders, actually endorses.
No,
So what do you, Virgil? You're curiously silent through all this discussion.
I was
have
told
nothing-
this would be easy.
Yeah.
No, Matt, that was
You were
perfectly-
misinformed.
Matt was a perfectly cromulent answer from Matt, but let me also answer it in this way and say, assessing what is an extrajudicial assassination, assessing whether this is a good or bad thing, I think you have to look at the person who conducted it. And one of the more horrifying things I've seen in the past few days was the president's explicit threat to bomb 52 military targets, cultural centers, places within the borders of Iran. A threatening and I would say an apocalyptic war crime. And I think that policy, which includes things like extrajudicial assassination, is a deep moral stain on all of us as Americans.
And you would include Obama's drone war as well as part of that.
Yes, I mean that's
You consider all of those extrajudicial assassinations.
Yes, I mean that is central to what I would call the show's critique. That is to what we are calling the left critique to the this amorphous group that sits to the left of the Democratic Party and is largely a reaction to the Obama administration when the Obama administration did not pan out how a lot of activists thought they would in 2008.
I totally agree with that part of your analysis, which points to the precedent set by Obama in his drone wars that, can be traced directly from that to the action taken by President Trump. But there are distinctions that one can make. And you just invoked, the phrase, I think, apocalyptic conflagration in the Mideast as a result of Trump's threat to bomb Iranian cultural sites, which would unquestionably be a war crime. And which is why so many on the left and so many Democrats put as the top priority in 2020 getting rid of Donald Trump, if not through impeachment, through the ballot box. And they look at your candidate, Bernie Sanders, and conclude, no, he's not the guy that can do it. And if you look at the polls, that's the one yardstick we have. Mason-Dixon poll just last week had Biden ahead of Trump in Florida and Virginia, two key states, and Sanders 4 or 5 points behind Trump. So if the goal here is first and foremost to get rid of the guy you just suggested is a war criminal, shouldn't the first priority be not electing Bernie Sanders, but electing a Democrat or nominating a Democrat who can beat Trump?
Well, first of all, I reject your premise right there.
Okay.
But
you don't know.
Well, you cite one.
We cite polls.
Right. You cited a poll.
Right.
One Mason-Dixon poll, which, as I understand it, is an outlier from the past year of hypothetical matchups. Biden versus Trump, Sanders versus Trump, so on. Consistently, I will concede that Biden generally does the best here in these matchups, which generally is maybe 4 or 5 points in the popular vote ahead. We can haggle over how much that is. But consistently, Bernie does second best in all of these matchups. Bernie, a guy who is a democratic socialist. You want to talk about someone who would do badly if we're only looking at hypothetical general election polls. It's Pete Buttigieg, it's Elizabeth Warren, it's Amy Klobuchar, it's the rest.
Yeah, Biden and Bernie are head and shoulders above any other Democrats in head-to-heads against Trump. A lot of that is name recognition, which should tell you that head-to-head matchups a year ahead of the poll of the election might not be that meaningful.
Right.
And if they're close, and they're close, I'm sorry. I mean, this is literally the first time I've heard of this. You're talking about two states, which, by the way, wouldn't have to win.
Pretty key states.
Well, he can win without Florida. If he wins Ohio in the Midwest, where Bernie would poll stronger than pretty much anybody else, you don't need to win Florida. But anyway, regardless of any of that, they are close enough that you cannot say, I'm going to take the demonstrably in public sundowning man. I'm sorry. We're not supposed to say this. It's not polite.
You're not supposed to say what?
That Biden is losing it. That he is not, his the screen door is open. Yeah. Okay, we know this. You can't say it. Poor Julian Castro said it, and everyone was horrified to point out that he is out to lunch.
Right.
So you're going to pick a guy who is. Forget the horrible policy. Forget the fact that he has his fingerprints on every awful neoliberal reform, the entire monstrous turn of the Democrats that has led directly to Trump being president, and he is a handmaiden of all of it. Forget all of that. He is just not up to the job, and we're supposed to pick him because he polls better than Bernie a year out of the election in a couple of states or by a couple of points. That, to me, is madness, and frankly conceals the fact that most people who say that aren't actually interested in electability. They just don't want a left-winger.
I want to stay on the presidential election, but I want to actually go back to something you said before, Matt, which was pretty provocative. And I don't know, maybe Mark can move it up in the interview or something. And I'm glad you said something provocative because we have you on the show because we want to expose you guys.
I want to say though, I'm not a Bernie surrogate or anything, so I don't want any of this crap of like Bernie wants them to have a nuke. I understand what's possible, what's realistic.
Well, I was going to say you didn't answer my question before
because
about
I understand that there are political
agree.
realities. You just asked me about my personal beliefs.
That's fine. Yeah, that's cool. But
I'm not going to be the NSC if Bernie becomes president.
Though I do want to know. You embedded this in one of your earlier questions.
Yeah.
What is distinct about Bernie's position right now? Bernie's immediate reaction to the assassination.
Yeah, well, he used it as a way to draw distinctions between him and Biden, pointing out Biden's prior support for the Iraq War, which he voted for, even though he was conflicted about it. And he draws the distinction between somebody like Biden and the mainstream Democrats who have been in favor of U.S. interventions in the Mideast over the years, and himself, who would tend not to be. Although I got to say, we had Jeff Weaver on the show last week, and I asked him, would Bernie Sanders, given intelligence that Soleimani might have been plotting an attack against American interests, would Bernie Sanders hesitate to use military force to take them out? Hold on a second. And Weaver said, no, Bernie Sanders would not hesitate to use, if there was a threat to American interests in the region, he would use military force. So that seems to be a distinction from where you guys are at.
Well, yeah, of course, because
so why are you just so enthusiastic about a guy who on a key foreign policy issue doesn't even support your position?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did not listen to your interview with Jeff Weaver. But,
you should.
As I understand it, say again?
You should. You have an opportunity to. It's out there.
But the response, and I guess the official Bernie Sanders campaign stance is, I would commit an extrajudicial assassination.
No, he actually, just to be fair, Mike, he did not say.
Because there's a lot of slippery words there.
He did not explicitly say, if it was Soleimani. What he said was, if American interests were threatened, lives, were threatened, he would use force. So
that's the 24 question. That's the fucking question they've been asking.
There's a truck full of explosives that's going to come to an American military base. Where you're going to stop it?
Yeah, Senator,
would you say no to that?
I think we should surrender to the bomb.
Yeah, and that's the illusion that the press does is the difference between a direct intervention on something that could kill a specific number of American troops or whatever, which, by the way, hopefully would be less of an issue because ideally, and Bernie has talked about this, they wouldn't be there in the first place.
Right.
But that is on the same level and is basically the same thing rhetorically as assassinating the head of the IRGC onto the soil at the airport of a freaking friendly country.
Well, he's
got diplomatic freaking passport.
Okay, but I want you to clarify your point on Iranian nukes, and I know this is just your opinion.
This is my take, okay?
Your take. But no, it's important. So your position is you would favor, you support Iran pursuing and obtaining a nuclear weapon, and you're not concerned. There's a question. You're not concerned. Well, first of all, the Iranians, you think, would be doing this purely for defensive purposes, A, and B, you're not concerned that they would use this, a nuclear weapon to threaten its neighbors, to threaten Israel, to maximize its influence in the region. You think it's entirely defensive.
What I would prefer, ideally, is for Iran to not hit a nuke as part of a process where there is universal denuclearization.
But
But how are we, especially as America's influence all over the world is challenged and declining, how are we supposed to maintain this idea that there's a club of nuclear countries that are responsible enough to get nukes and nobody else gets them? And if you're anywhere in like the liminal space of trying to be a regional power, but you're not on our slate of countries that are approved, that we're going to militarily interdict you to the level of threatening to commit cultural genocide against you unless you get a nuke. I'm just saying is that all of this means that the only rational action for these countries is to pursue nuclear weapons. I'm not saying I'm going to help them. I'm not going to smuggle. I'm not Carl Fuchs. I'm not going to smuggle the uranium. But it is in their interests to do it because they did the nuclear deal. They did it. And what happened immediately afterwards? We got a new guy in, tore it up, and immediately started.
Did you guys support the nuclear deal?
Yes, that was the one thing of the Obama administration that I think was an unambiguously good thing, and I was happy he did it. And it's like it's on the sheet for me. Obama, it's a lot of bad and a few of the good things. One on the top for me is the nuclear deal.
Yeah.
So absolutely. No.
What are a couple of other top things?
I'm saying now in this new era, I mean, how are you supposed to, with a straight face, say America should be overseeing anybody's nuclear anything? We have no credibility. It's all gone. And I know we don't want to believe that, but how are you supposed to spend 2.5 years talking about how terrible Trump is and how he's destroying our reputation around the world, doing X, Y, and Z, and then say we still have the standing? Because how can we say we're not going to elect another senile game show host any fucking time?
And building on that, I apologize. I should have framed this a different way. What I meant was you seem to imply that Bernie's not what I want in terms of Middle Eastern policy, when his response among all of the top level Democratic presidential candidates, his response to the assassination was uniquely what I want. It was to say, in no uncertain terms, that this was bad. This was a crime. I don't know, exactly what word to use. I will get us out of the Middle East. Yes. We are getting out of the Middle East. And nobody else said that. Maybe Marianne Williamson said that.
Actually, Trump has said that, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
but
isn't that
now he's sending more troops in.
So.
They all
okay, but Trump is not a guy who has had compiled a voting record over the past 30 years in the U.S. Congress against these foreign interventions. And as well, when we're talking about whether any foreign government can trust us to maintain our commitments, you could say, Trump was an aberration. We'll go back. We'll have a normal president now who keeps our treaty obligations. And then the Iranians have nothing to worry about, when literally every single U.S. senator, except for 2, voted to increase sanctions on Iran 2 years ago. And those 2 were Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders.
While they were in compliance with every element of the treaty.
I got another one for you. What about providing military aid to Ukraine to fight Russian aggression?
No. Good Lord, no.
You
Terrible
guys,
idea.
You agree, Virgil?
I gotta be honest with you. I do not care that much about foreign policy, except when it is just like in your face. You're staring at the unblinking eye of horror and American aggression and war crimes and seeing all the lunacy and racism that it unleashes. So when it comes to arming crime, probably not. I don't know.
What do you guys disagree? Do you guys disagree on? What do you disagree on?
Oh yeah, okay. So the Star Wars prequels, we have had hours of discussions. We can go to the tape on these. It's on our show, on a show called Star Wars Minute. Are the most controversial episodes of Star Wars Minute to date.
Yeah, he insists that the prequels are somehow
all right,
good.
Well, since we're on
not.
Pop culture, I hear that you guys are not big fans of The West Wing, and that The West Wing has kind of poisoned a generation of Democratic operatives, that, the belief that you can make a high-minded speech and transform American politics. My now 15-year-old daughter just discovered West Wing, and she's been binge-watching it. So I guess I might be poisoning her mind. So what's the problem with West Wing?
I think the essential problem with West Wing is that it says that what matters in politics is intentions, that the way that political change happens is through
persuasion,
but not of the people, importantly. Of other people in the room with you, of the other party. People, the assumption is
because it's a TV show
that
with
everybody.
characters.
Well, right, I know. I'm just saying is that's not what gets communicated. Is that you get Republicans and Democrats in a room and they all want what's best for the country, and you talk it out, And I think that the Obama administration, by their own admission, operated under those principles. They all have said as much. And then they ran into the modern Republican Party in the form of Mitch McConnell, and they were absolutely poleaxed by it because they kept waiting for him to act like someone from the West Wing, someone who had some higher thing that he cared about, and it never happened. And then they had no response to it. That's my main issue.
So, look, I mean, the principle Obama operated under is that we're a diverse country with diverse interests, and they are reflected in the Congress, in our political system, with people with vastly different perspectives on the world than you guys have. And so then the question is, do you try to work with people like that to compromise, or is it all my way or the highway? What gets something
Now you're really
accomplished here? Okay.
What are the diverse interests?
What are the diverse interests?
You said we're a country of diverse interests.
Well, obviously,
some people are very Christian and other people are very secular. So those are diverse interests.
But those are not really political interests. Like generally, we have some 90% support for religious pluralism. Very few people want to make a theocracy. When you say diverse interests like that, it sounds like, I want to eat spaghetti for dinner. I want to eat, what's another food? Hamburgers. That's great. I was going to say lasagna, but that's too close to spaghetti. That's not very diverse interests. That sounds like we're closer.
That's intra-party.
Okay. So when you say diverse interests, that's what you make it sound like. When I think of diverse interests, I think I own this fucking copper wire factory. I want to pollute this river. I want to dump fucking toxic waste in the poor people neighborhood. And then another interest might be, hey, I live in the poor people neighborhood. I don't want to die, please.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, there are perspectives that the free market system and capitalism is a better way of managing and of having an economy than state-run bureaucrats telling you and I what we should do or what healthcare we should have or whatever.
Protectionism.
I mean, that is, you may not agree, but there are people who legitimately have different philosophical perspectives on the best way for a good society than the ones that you do. And they've got some pretty powerful arguments in their favor by looking, for starters, at the performance of socialist systems over the many decades and their many failures.
How about why doesn't Scandinavia ever count when these things are put out? How come the country that actually has money to begin with and socializes as opposed to countries that are in the imperial
Scandinavians have turned away from the democratic socialism that was its hallmark in the 50s and 60s.
Well, hold on a minute though. They always that's it. That's always what happens. It's like,
what happens?
Oh, they're not socialist anymore. Really, they're way more socialist than us. And if you said let's do what they're doing now, which is less socialist than it used to be, but it's still way more socialist than it is now. Even though that's an example of them not being socialist anymore, it's still too socialist for us, though. The thing that's not as socialist and therefore proof of capitalism's victory or whatever, it's still too socialist for us. It always will be. Because this has nothing to do with ideology. It has to do with
Matt
money.
Brunig is fond of pointing out, Norway's sovereign wealth fund controls a much bigger chunk of its economy than Venezuela does.
Yes, it's much more state-run. Yeah. Norway has a larger percentage of its economy under state control than Venezuela does. That's and they both have oil wealth at the basis of it, and that's just a fact.
All right, you guys are Bernie guys. You're all in for Bernie. Let's look at the rest of the Democratic field and give us your sense of. I
want to start with Buttigieg because someone told me that you guys don't really like Mayor Pete, and that you did one of you say that he might be a CIA asset?
We've all said that, and his record is. What's he doing over there?
What do you base that on?
He was on vacation in Somalia?
Yeah, he took a nice vacation to Somaliland.
Had some conversations
with a guy who's serious about this. With a guy. Wait a minute. He took a vacation to Somaliland.
Yeah.
With a guy, and then
which is not Somalia, by the way.
Yes, it's a breakaway area.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he met with local leaders, like we all like to do on vacation in war zones. And he did it with a guy who he somehow co-wrote as a kid a New York Times op-ed with a guy whose entire resume is USAID, and he's literally in charge of the
it's the Agency for International Development.
Yeah.
It does have a stated public
it also has
purpose
a
of
documented connection to the Central
right.
Intelligence.
And so
Yeah,
therefore,
I think we went to prison there or something. There's like there is some. But wait a second, you
So
guys.
does the
Wait, I just want to. You guys are serious that you think, or is there some?
I'm just saying it could, I don't know.
just-
How am I
yeah,
supposed
I
to
don't
know?
know.
all right,
Well, you
so-
said it.
Well, you just throw this out there.
Yeah,
I
it
mean, you have
sounds right.
no
Yeah, it
evidence.
sounds
It
fucking
looks it
right.
makes sense.
Sounds right.
And the thing is that
Fucking
like even if he wasn't, his record and what he wants,
might as
and
well be.
It might as well be. So it's like I don't understand what difference it actually makes.
But
It's not
what
like
you-
if he wasn't in the
sounds
CIA,
like
he'd be
the
worth supporting.
intellectual
But what's your main
rigor
issue
of
with
Roger
Buttigieg? That's
Stone
not-
here. I mean, sounds
Honestly,
right.
I will
Must
say,
be.
I will say this: the one argument against Mayor Pete being a CIA agent is, if that fucker could put CIA on his resume, top secret CIA guy, you would not hear the end of it.
That's true,
It's
yeah.
not like he's ashamed of
Okay,
that.
so look, if Buttigieg were to get the nomination and be the nominee against Donald Trump, would you support him?
What does support mean? What do you
Would
mean
you
by
vote
that?
for him?
I live in New York. What difference does it make?
Well, you cast a vote. I mean,
I probably wouldn't.
You probably would not, Virgil.
I don't know.
Would you want him to beat Trump?
What difference does that make? This is
Well,
all.
you see no
this
difference.
This is the shit that drives me insane. I am just a guy. We're all just guys. What we want about anything doesn't matter.
You're guys
And
with an audience.
so
That's
what-
why we have you on.
But this is all meant as
People
chaff
listen
to go away
to
from the
you.
essential argument. The essential argument is we are at a fucking crossroads. We are at a crucial moment. We either change the way things are done, or we go down this road that is leading us
Okay,
to an
all right.
apocalypse.
So Mayor Pete,
and whether
you
or not
and-
Mayor Pete gets it or not, who gives a shit at that
neither
point?
neither one of you would commit to even voting for him against Donald Trump. What about Klobuchar?
I don't care.
Yeah,
I live in New York, as I said. It's
Again,
not,
for me, I mean, it really depends what the general election campaign, how that shakes out.
all right. So this is a maybe vote for Klobuchar if she's the
but
nominee.
here's what's
Yeah.
absurd about the question. We know that what people like Mayor Pete and Klobuchar are saying now, as kind of frankly shitty as what they're saying now is, what they're going to be saying in 8 months is going to be different all over again.
More broadly.
So if Amy Klobuchar, if she gets the nomination and then pivots at the convention and says, "I'm a Nazi. I am a National Socialist in the Hitler kind, and I'm more of a Nazi than Trump, sir." and I want to. She says that she wants to make America a white ethno state and murder all the minorities. I would not support her.
right.
I would want her to lose.
Rather than asking about you guys, let me ask you where you think your audience would be if you obviously have this very intense Bernie bro audience.
you know what?
If Bernie doesn't get the nomination, and it's not Warren, who I assume would be your second pick, and it's one of the others, Biden, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, where do you think your audience?
I'll tell you
would
this,
be?
and I hope everyone listening who is on the fence, maybe they don't like Bernie, maybe they don't think he can win or whatever. I'll tell you right this. Our audience will, as a block, refuse to vote for whoever gets the nomination, which means
Wait, if it's not Bernie.
yes, which means that for everybody who, as you said, is concerned first and foremost with defeating Trump, they are morally obligated to vote for Bernie in the primaries.
Yeah.
Because he is the only one who has a significant chunk of people who will not vote for the nominee, which means you have to pick him, because if he doesn't get the nomination, you're SOL. So if you're really concerned, as you said earlier, with electability,
Right.
you have to pick Bernie.
Okay.
Okay, I got one more question about you guys, which is it's like a generational question because you guys are like 20, 30 years younger than we are. And you probably come across to some of our audience as passionate or angry.
Cool guys.
Right.
Yeah, cool dudes.
Right, yeah. A little angry. And I want to hear, would you agree that you're angry about the situation in this country right now? Is that a fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think I'm not, and then I start talking about it, and then I get really angry.
So that's what I wanted to probe a little bit. And I think there are a lot of good reasons for people in your generational cohort to be angry, but I want to hear from you guys. Why are you angry? Why do you think that you guys have been fucked? I guess by us, or mostly by Isikoff. So just talk about that a little bit.
How is it fucked up?
No. But
I never heard of you guys
like,
until 2 weeks ago, so I don't think I
But
could have
the
fucked you.
boomers. Okay,
right,
boomer.
Right. Okay.
I don't take seriously this idea of generational politics. I mean,
plenty
again,
of poor
I
boomers.
think we're pretty clear, and you've got a copy of our New York Times best-selling book, The Chapo Guide to Revolution, a manifesto against logic, facts, and reason. And we make pretty clear in our book, I like to think, that what we're recommending people use as a heuristic for explaining the economy and political situation, and frankly, the material forces that shape their lives. You shouldn't look to culture. Don't look to this, boomers versus millennials, generational divide. Look to your material class interests to dictate the, political circumstances we find ourselves in, who in America, gets to live where, gets to do what for a living, or even has to work, who, as a group collectively, whose interests are represented by Congress, by the presidency, by the judiciary, by the, DC land, and which views get promulgated in the media.
Well, that would be us, right?
Yes.
We
that's
decide
how
that,
Issaquah functions.
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect answer.
Well, on that note, I kind of like that as a tagline for this episode.
I think that's the title of the episode.
Anyway, thank you guys for coming.